Hello, everybody. Welcome to Blog Talk Radio, the Sales Professional Network, TSPN. I am your host, Andre Harrell. This is Blog Talk Radio's first and only show dedicated to the needs of the sales professional, and regardless of the industry that you're in. If you're in the sales business, this channel and show is just for you. We do focus on topics that are relevant to all industries, and the commonality is that we in the sales business as sales professionals face similar challenges each and every day, and TSPN, the Sales Professional Network, sincerely was designed to create a forum where we can discuss these challenges and come up with some best solutions and best practices to those challenges. This show tonight is brought to you by AH and Beyond Consulting. That's AH2 and Beyond.com, delivering beyond our clients' expectations in sales strategies, marketing, and sales training. AH and Beyond, increasing your competency means increasing your sales results. Tonight's brief show is really just my thoughts on what makes a great salesperson. And setting a nice platform for my thoughts tonight, I want to thank Charlie Johnson, who is the CEO and founder of Charlie Johnson and Consulting Associates, who was my guest speaker on last night's show. You know, through Charlie's wisdom, personal experiences, explaining on what encompasses the great salesperson, really did lead me to a lot of my thoughts on the subject that I'll be talking about tonight. Again, on what makes a great sales person. You know, at the start of last night's show, I posed a couple of questions, if you remember, for those of you who listened to last night's show. The first was, so you think you're a great salesperson? And how do you qualify that? That was the first question I posed. And then what makes you a great salesperson was the second question I posed. And I want to speak to two areas we did not really embellish on last night's show. And these two things are failure and humility. And let's look at failure. You know, the word in itself does not connotate anything close to positivity. Yet, when faced with it, we're all told that overcoming it is sort of a badge of honor, hence a positive outcome, right? And I know many of you have heard the saying, failing forward. You know, there are books available with this same heading. And in a nutshell, it really means embracing failure as an opportunity to overcome and educate yourself. Now, with all that said, you know, I've always believed that in order to be good or quote-unquote a great at anything does take a great deal of failure. And how you develop wisdom, education, competency, and maturity during that failure period is really what's important. And to Charlie's point last night, it really is the journey, or code word scars, that you develop from the adversities of failure. But we all know that, right? Right? Again, you can buy books on what I just said, or you can hear personal accounts from very successful people on how they failed many, many times to get where they are and blah, 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 right? But let's look at this a little bit differently. You know, how many of you really know how to overcome failure in your track to become a great salesperson? And here's another question. How many of you know how to communicate your failures when it comes to achieving, quote-unquote, greatness in sales or whatever you do? Okay, let's go back. How do you really overcome failures, and how do you communicate those failures? Both are on the road to achieving success or the proverbial greatness. And this is just my opinion, folks. You know, to me, as opposed to asking the question, what makes a great salesperson, couldn't you ask, what makes failure great as a salesperson? Let me repeat that. Couldn't you ask, what makes failure great as a salesperson? I think we can all agree that typically the first step to achieving anything in life is usually a step that is just a little loose. In other words, you know, there is some adversity or a little bit of failure, but the key is to kind of back up off that step, fix it, and then move forward. So my thoughts on what makes a great salesperson and the talk of overcoming failure as a way to get to that level of success is not to concentrate so much on the mental aspects. And I've done shows, and if you go back into my archives and look at shows, I've done shows on overcoming adversity mentally. And again, I've said ad nauseum that you can find books, you can look up motivational speakers, they're by the tons, etc., on that subject. What I'm asking you to do tonight is to ask yourself the two questions. How do you really overcome failures? And how do you communicate your failures when it comes to trying to achieve success or greatness, and in this respect, sales? Let me quickly explain communicating your failures, because it's kind of a nice transition into my next topic, which is humility, as it relates to the whole question of what makes a great salesperson. One of the most difficult things we all as human beings, I think, struggle with is voicing out in a manner that's useful and impactful why things didn't turn out the way we envisioned. In other words, saying failure. And I think partly because our society shuns failure. But interestingly enough, we also exalt those who have failed and have picked themselves up. It's an interesting concept that I certainly should have an entire show on the subject, because it's kind of a strange dichotomy. But a way I've always learned on how to gather some sort of education from, and in this case, failure, is being able to spell out in a verbal manner why I failed and what I learned from the experience that may help others. As I personally develop to be great at whatever I do, I believe if you can't share or lead by example, in my opinion, you're not great or successful. And again, folks, that's just my opinion. Okay, so to be able to verbally communicate why you failed and what you learned from failure, and quite frankly, how you can teach that to others and mentor others, really in turn helps yourself develop to become even a better success at what you're currently doing. Again, if you're in the sales business. Again, just my opinion. Okay, I just talked about failure and why that word is important when we examine what makes a great salesperson. And I've submitted why the question should be, what makes failure what makes failure great as a salesperson? Let me repeat that again. What makes failure great as a salesperson? Again, which nicely leads me into my second favorite word, and something that's strongly missed in today's society, and that is humility. I joked yesterday in my introduction to the show that if you call yourself great as a salesperson, that's probably not headed in the direction of humility. But I guess I would appreciate the confidence that anyone would espouse themselves as being great. I certainly would respect that amount of confidence. But then I would challenge you that call yourselves great, verbally telling me how you really overcome failure. Okay, so if you call yourself great, I guess I would. I challenge you to tell me verbally and specifically how you really overcome failure. But humility, as an interesting word or behavior, and because it's defined somewhat as a humble type of word or a humble type of behavior or exemplifying humility, is somewhat challenging. And of course, there is a dictionary definition of the word humility, which succinctly states the quality of being modest and respectful. Now, I think we can all agree it's much more than that. And going back to our subject of being great as a salesperson, when it comes to humility, I'll tell you personally, when I had success earlier in my career as a sales professional, humility wasn't something I didn't have. And that's even after some epic fails that I had early in my career, because I didn't learn anything from my failures back then. And humility, in my eyes, true humility, is the ability to consciously say to yourself and examine, this is what I learned from the experience. And I think being young back then, and let's be real, that's just not going to happen. You know, I didn't look at my failures as a learning experience. I just looked at it as, you know what, I can't believe this is happening to me, and how I'm going to get over this, and how am I going to get forward through this. And, you know, I created this sales slump mentally because of what I was going through. And again, a lot of that is just being young and immature. And I said earlier on, you know, a lot of going through trying to be the best that you can be or great that you can be is a long journey. And it takes a lot of maturity, it takes a lot of adversity, and it takes a lot of failure to get to that point. So I will tell you, I've come in contact with extremely successful sales professionals. I'm talking about folks that have moved millions of dollars, some of whom have even been on my shows as guest speakers. Unassuming, brilliant, thankful, and importantly, thoughtful people you'd ever want to meet. And when I say thoughtful, it almost relates to this form of humility. You know, they can tell you exactly what they learned from their failure in the most microscopic way. In other words, you know, they could tell you how they really overcame their failures in the most thoughtful, communicative way. So humility in this context is your ability to learn from the failures in a way that removes you from hubris and in the lane of growth and personal development. So when we talk about what makes a great salesperson, well, what makes failure great as a salesperson? How do you really overcome failures? And lastly, how do you communicate your failures when it comes to trying to achieve success or the proverbial greatness? You know, those are the questions I would love for you to ask yourself. And I hope tonight in this short show, I hope that I've explained to you why those questions, again, I'll repeat them. What makes failure great as a salesperson? How do you really overcome failures as a salesperson or just someone that is in any job in life? How do you communicate your failures? Those are questions I want each of you who are listening to my Afterthought show tonight, I want you to ask yourself. Don't go out to buy the books. I'm sure like I said, there's books you can go get, but I want you to look at yourself in the mirror and ask yourself those three questions. Because when you're confronted with things that are not going your way, or you're confronted with failure, I'm not sure there's anything that you can read that's going to give you the answer. The answer is going to be looking at yourself in the mirror and identifying what that failure or what didn't go your way and examining why it didn't go your way and then verbalizing it to yourself as to why it didn't go that way. And then lastly and most importantly, communicate it. Help others. Because in turn, guess what? It helps your development in overcoming future failures down the line. If you're interested in learning how to be the best sales professional you can be, we do offer creative and innovative programs on how to leverage your already skill of selling. We do not, and let me repeat this, we do not change you. And we don't want to change you. We just want to make you better with your development program, with our development program. So you can contact us at AH Square and Beyond Consulting. That's AH2 and Beyond.com, or our number to give us a call is 267-221-8529. Tonight's abbreviated show, my Afterthought show, is brought to you by, again, AH Square and Beyond Consulting. That's AH2 and Beyond.com, delivering beyond our clients' expectations in sales strategies, marketing, and sales training. AH Square and Beyond. Increasing your competency means increasing your sales results. Just a reminder, next week's show, April 24th, 7 o'clock p.m. Again, we're every Tuesday at 7 o'clock p.m., the Sales Professional Network. We're going to be talking about how to be politically savvy with a world-renowned expert on leadership, image, etiquette, and personal development and branding, Roz Osheroff. You will not want to miss Roz's tips, again, on surviving in a world of politics. Politics exists, as you know, folks, in everything we do. And being able to wade through what I call the ambiguity takes experience and a lot of savvy. So please join us to what I think is going to be a great informative show next week. Again, that's next Tuesday, April 24th at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And as I always like to remind everyone, please follow us to get updates on show topics. And again, if you go to my channel page and you see the little follow button underneath my picture, if you press on that, you'll get emails as to the subjects that we're going to be having in the future, as well as times. Of course, again, we're every Tuesday at 7 o'clock p.m. And, of course, sometimes I give, like I'm doing tonight, my afterthought show on subjects that we talked about the previous night, Tuesday night. Again, please share word of mouth about this show and about this channel, the Sales Professional Network. And I sincerely want to say this is a channel that is meant for the sales professional. But you know what? We talk about things that are meant for everybody. As you know, we talk about a breadth of subjects that basically boil around to developing you and making you an even better person. And so while this show and channel is meant for the sales professional, invite all your friends who you think might get something out of this show. So again, I want to welcome everybody back to my Afterthought show, if you listened to my show last night, and say thank you for listening. Hear me out, I guess, on my thoughts on what makes a great salesperson, and even, again, my change in that question, which is what makes failure great as a salesperson. And I hope I was able to convince you to kind of look at that in a different manner. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us on the Sales Professional Network, Wednesday night, my Afterthought show. Hopefully you'll join us next week. Thank you so much, everybody. Have a good night.